Hey everybody, Dan here with Pain Free You. Today I've got the pleasure of introducing one of my associates in the mind body space, Charlie Merrill. And Charlie runs the Merrill Performance Center in Boulder, Colorado. And it's essentially a mind body physical therapy practice. And so I saw Charlie at the Boulder workshop, the ATNS workshop, a couple of weeks ago. I saw him a year ago, and I just figured it would be really cool to have him on the channel and chat a little bit about these concepts. And I'm particularly interested in how Charlie blends the two because physical therapy is very much traditionally a body-based focus. And so, but he's extremely well aware of and expert at all the mind-body concepts. So I figured it would be really pretty neat to bring Charlie on and explore some of these commonalities and differences, and see where that conversation goes. So, why don't you introduce yourself to the channel, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dan. I think you did a great job. I'm here based in Boulder, Colorado. I've been practicing for about 25 years, and the first half of that was very biomedical, fixing bodies, manipulating joints, needling things, corrective exercise. So I'm well steeped and versed in that, which is really helpful when I talk to clients that still have concerns about these things. The second half of that is very much what you and I do together, right? Which is recognizing that the brain is where all pain, regardless of the cause, is constructed and experienced,
Mhm.
and that we can't just treat the body. We have to recognize they're connected, and we want to sort of treat them as a single unit.
Yeah,
And
I was
I,
just gonna say the mind and body aren't connected; they're one system.
that's right. Well said. Yes. Thanks for clarifying. And you may or may not know this, Dan, but you were, I've been following you for a long time, whether you know it or not, because you sort of came out of like you were one of the first people that had their own pain journey that I was like, wow, this guy's really killing it. Like he's doing a great job. He's really clear. He's calm. He's sharing these things in such a powerful way. And to me, it was almost like the best example of beginner's mindset. Like, not that you were a beginner at the time, but people that have had their own experience and people that can share this in a really elegant way, I think are really impactful. And so people kept telling me, I just messaged you the other day. People kept telling me, Charlie, I love your stuff. You and Dan Buglio, they're like, you and Dan Buglio, like this has been the most helpful to me. I'm like,
Awesome.
okay, I need to let Dan know, you know.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that's what sparked the idea of let's get together on the channel and sit and have a chat on video. Was that message from you saying, "Hey, somebody just let me know." So thank that person for kind of reconnecting us after the workshop.
Of course. Yeah, sometimes you're a lone wolf, sort of one man show. I'm the same, and sometimes it feels a little isolated. And so I love connecting
Awesome.
with clinicians.
Well,
So
I'm,
thanks for the
I'm
space.
thrilled to have you here. It was great to see you in person as well.
For sure.
So I think what I wanted to start out with is a couple of questions, just that I think are leading questions that I'm sure many of the people in my audience probably have. And, the first one is, when is physical therapy, a biomechanical approach, needed for somebody with TMS, neuroplastic pain?
Yeah, it's a
So,
great question.
like, because I imagine you come across that, decision fork often. Like, what do I do with this person? So, why don't you walk me through some of your concepts and logic and approach?
Yeah. I still use manual therapy, hands-on interventions, and movement most days in my practice. I just use it with a very different intention and mindset than I used to. The idea is that, right, we have the ability to treat pain from the top down by treating the brain and nervous system to create physical change. And we have the opportunity to treat the brain from the bottom up. We have this great big sensory organ through which we can feed information to update prediction or to create change in some way. And if I can do that without creating fear, it can be a really fast way to create change. So the first time that I would use it is if there's some clear physical pattern that I know that if I can treat, I can get pain to drop quickly so that people can then do the other work that you and I know is so important, right? Getting to their emotions and working on their fear of the pain. So I find that to be a really powerful short-term intervention, just like medicine would be,
Can
right?
you give me an idea what you mean by a very specific physical pattern that would lead you down the path of saying, yeah, let me work with this person physically and then make sure we wrap in the mind body aspect too. So give me an example of that, if you could.
Sure. So you just shared before we got on this old picture of you from your original pain journey where your body was shifted in this certain way.
Hmm.
Um, we know that's a result of a brain and nervous system that's in a state of danger alarm, right? The muscles
Hmm.
have gotten very tense on one
Yeah.
side, things have shifted. That's adaptive, right? It's an adaptive pattern over the course of time. You got that to change by working on your brain and nervous system. If you were in my clinic and I got you on my table and I said, wow, you've adapted, Dan, in this way that really makes sense. It's really smart, right? This is how your brain has tried to protect you.
Right.
Can we manipulate this joint? Can we release this muscle tension? Can we get you a little bit less shifted? And I know you tried this and it didn't work very well
Correct.
because of the way they did it. But can I do that on day one to get you feeling a little bit better so that you come back the next time, and all along, I'm reducing fear about this. I'm not making it a big deal,
Right.
right? And the next time you come back, you're like, wow, Charlie, I feel 50% better. Like, okay, now let's talk about some of these other things that are actually the primary drivers of your symptoms,
Okay.
right? And what's interesting is if I try that and it doesn't work, which it often doesn't, or it makes you worse, that's evidence that I'm barking up the wrong tree.
Right.
So it gives me the chance to test the hypothesis. If someone has a little bit of doubt or they're not buying in to what you and I are sharing, it's also sometimes a reason that I'll start there to say, okay, let's test the hypothesis. Let's see if this works.
Okay.
If it works, that's great. If
Yeah.
it doesn't work, I'm really good at what I
It's
do. I'm
less
really good
likely
at
up here. Yeah.
bodies. I'm really good at fixing bodies. So if it doesn't work, that's more evidence that we're barking up the wrong tree. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And, the vast majority of people which I have interacted with in my coaching practice or just online and comments and all that stuff have spent a lot of time trying to work on their body. And it's kind of like, well, this mind body approach, this nervous system, brain creating pain, almost seems like not a last hope, but well, I mean, it's the answer as to what's been going on all along. And therefore, in my view, a very accurate way of going about it. So I think a lot of people have explored all the physical treatments, chiropractic, physical therapy, orthopedic, you name it, injections, surgeries.
And in those cases, I typically won't go there because they've already done that work for
Right.
me. Um, People can worry like maybe they didn't do it right, or maybe they didn't do it good enough, or maybe, and sometimes I have to address those fears.
Yeah,
And so I'll take the time sometimes to do that to make sure we check the box and be like, we can take that off your list now. That's
sure.
not the problem. Yeah.
Cool. Um, One of the other questions in my case, and a lot of the people in my audience have seen my pictures. If you want to see it, go to painfreeyou.com and scroll halfway down the page, and you'll see a picture of me really whacked out crooked. Um, but for people who have things that appear functional mechanically, but they've got pain, and you've done that, what you just talked about as far as isolating, have they tried the physical already? And not, if not, let's go after the brain nervous system stuff. So should people focus on relieving the pain and oftentimes the muscle tension that's the result of the brain perceiving that danger before they address any remaining functional issues? Or, knowing what you know, can both of those things be addressed at once? Because in my experience, when I was all crooked and going to the physical therapist, um, they didn't know about the mind body aspect. And even though
Mhm.
I brought in, the CDs of Dr. Sarno's work, they sat on the front desk for 3 weeks, not
Sad,
listened to.
sad.
So, in my case, I felt like the physical therapist practice, their unawareness of Dr. Sarno and his work and the brain's role in this, and then just the hyper focus on the body acted as a nocebo, which made me worse and worse and worse over time. So, in the case where you've got the benefit of both sets of knowledge, if somebody came in crooked, like you said, you might try to provide some relief. Um, but do you think for the average Joe that has symptoms, should they start with a mind-body approach and then address functional once they're feeling better, or can they do both at the same time?
Yeah, the answer is always it depends, right? I really hesitate to make rules because every time I make a
Okay,
rule, somebody breaks it, as you know.
sure.
Um, 9 times out of 10 in my practice, even in Boulder, Colorado, where I'm treating a lot of active people that would never guess they have mind-body symptoms,
Athletes,
they don't need body work. They need mind-body work.
sure,
They need to treat from the top down. That's what they're missing in most
sure.
cases. Um,
For many athletes, though, there's such a strong belief that runners have, all sorts of knee issues, and climbers have
yeah,
shoulders and hips and all like. So the athletic world is ripe with, you got a problem, it's this, it's that, it's that, it's the IT band, it's that, and it's such a
this is my
body
work,
focused.
man. This is my work. This is the world
And
I
to
live in.
convince them that their scared brain is likely the cause of the main suffering must be challenging. So, can you talk to that a little bit and how you address some of these athletes that have been body focused since they started running?
It's challenging. I mean, I love it. I think, I don't have like the like long, in-depth pain story that a lot of really great coaches have, which can leave me feeling like an imposter sometimes because I haven't lived it in that same way. But as an athlete, I have a lot of experience in that world. I can walk the walk and talk the talk, and I've seen this play out in my athletic life in many ways.
Right.
So um, it's very natural for me to talk to athletes about these things without feeling held back, and I don't tend to hold back with them because most of the time, as you said, they've tried all these other things,
Yeah.
and and they haven't helped. They've had a bike fit, they've had someone look at their running gait, they've put a lift in their shoe, they throw everything at it, and so they're the most extreme example of
Yeah.
people that have tried all the things and still haven't gotten better. But even then, there's reticence to letting go because it just makes so much sense that I'm an athlete. It must be something wrong with my body.
I'm beating up my body. I've overused it.
Yeah, and I talk about this too in higher level sports. We have a family friend who's playing Division I soccer,
Mm,
and they treat that sport in college like a business. Like the coaches are not trained to talk about emotions. They're not getting into the psychological part of the sport at all.
right.
And what a missed opportunity when you talk about performance in any sport. What a missed opportunity to not play with that dial, right?
Yeah.
You're physically training, you're maximizing physical training recovery, but you're not talking about feelings. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. So imagine the pressure that some of these athletes are under.
It's incredible.
And I just look at the world of golf and just think that all these golfers whose careers have been sidelined or significantly impacted, the pressure of golf, I mean, these guys don't earn a check unless they play well.
Who was it, Dan, at the last tournament, U.S. versus Europe, that woke up with a couldn't turn his neck, had a crick in his neck, and couldn't start?
I forget who it was, but I heard about that. But we look at like Tiger Woods, we look at like even Freddie Couples.
Yeah,
He had back pain through his whole career. Now he was still an amazing player, so is Tiger. But
it's in
we
every
look,
sport. It's
yeah,
happening in every sport. And in that situation, we're going to forget the name of the golfer, but what's the first thing they did? They did an MRI, and they said, "Oh, look, there's a bulging
surgery
disc. That must be why he has pain," right? Not considering that the pressure of this tournament is
or
up
the
here,
career in general.
whatever else was going on in his life.
Yeah,
So, I mean, in every sport, Dan, there's story after story after story. Don't get me started.
no, that's
Um,
okay. So,
so, but I want to come back to your other question, if I can, just for a
please,
second.
sure.
This idea of like when I see an athlete or really anyone that has physical findings like you did, can we treat that in both ways? And I think the answer is generally yes, depending on the person. But it's really a slippery slope. It takes a really skilled clinician to be able to do the manual therapy body work and the like prescriptive style exercise without sending the wrong message to
Yeah.
someone that there's something wrong with their body. So that's probably the biggest challenge I have in my practice is busting myths for people about why it's not their body, other things they've heard from PTs and chiropractors, and then um, maybe sometimes still recognizing that there's adaptive change and maybe some deconditioning that might be helpful to work on so they can perform better in their lives, even if it's not really directly connected to the pain, right? It may not correlate with their pain at all, but if they believe that it can help, it might help, you know?
So you mentioned the word deconditioning, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that I deal with that have come to the conclusion that their body is deconditioned from a year, 2 years of pain, lack of movement. I've been mostly on the couch or in bed for 2 years. And so now I'm starting to move my body and I'm experiencing extreme pain. So let's take out TMS for a second. If somebody, just a regular person without the mind body condition, were to have no activity for a couple of years and then start going on some gentle walks, would they experience extreme pain or just normal muscle soreness? I view
Just
the latter, right?
the second
So,
one.
and it's hard getting through because people are like, well, I'm all atrophied and I'm not as strong as I used to. And I said, that's fine, but you're not supposed to hurt for years because you're moving again.
Right.
Because
And
there's
how,
a huge percentage of the population that doesn't exercise at all.
right.
So,
And a lot of those people don't have pain.
correct. Okay.
Yeah. It's a
So I
great
wanted
question.
to touch on the deconditioning and the atrophy. And my example is, let's look at, people with eating disorders um, that are skeletons. They have no muscle tone at all, but no chronic pain. They still
So
are capable of movement.
So there's not been probably research on this, or I haven't looked for research on this, but my experience in the clinic is that when someone's dealing with chronic pain that's not due to an injury, it's not due to them being in a cast or fully immobilized or in
Mhm.
outer space for a year,
Sure.
the brain knows to preserve muscle mass, bone density, fitness, even though that person hasn't been active. It's not going to actively start shedding, right?
Yeah.
Muscle mass just because you haven't been able to be in your body over time. Different from someone that's been in a coma,
Right.
right? Where there's going to be real significant actual deconditioning. So my experience is that the brain and nervous system preserve fitness but then people have this story that they've been told or that they think that there's some vulnerability now in their body. And of course, that keeps them stuck, right?
Hmm.
So I often like to flip this upside down for people and remind them that the body is always adapting to what you're doing or not doing. So how are we going to address if you're worried about deconditioning? And there might be a little bit compared to what you were doing.
Sure.
How are we going to address that if we stay dormant, if we stay inactive,
Yeah.
if we avoid things? We're not. The body requires input to be able to adapt and change and get better.
Yes.
Um,
So the way I view that and explain that is, yes, you've been dormant. You haven't moved much for a year because of the pain. And now that you're starting down this mind body path, you're starting to move again. But when the pain increases, my view is it's because the brain is perceiving, uh-oh, you're moving your body. That's dangerous. Don't do it. Pain can flare. It's very common for people who haven't moved much to immediately jump to the conclusion that, well, I'm deconditioned and moving my body is harming me in some way. And that's why the pain is so extreme. And I think, look, I always talk about normal muscle fatigue, normal muscle soreness from exercise, but that's like a few days.
right.
And if you exercise and you're sore for a month, the brain's involved.
100%. I don't know if you do this, Dan, but if I use fear in any direction, it's to scare people into moving again.
Cool.
Because not moving is arguably more dangerous than moving,
Yeah.
physically and psychologically.
Yeah, I talk a lot in the coaching about, get yourself moving, take a walk, do laps around the dining room table if you have to, holding on to the chairs if you have to, but staying in bed, staying on the couch, staying in the recliner is not the solution. So
Can I share an image, Dan, that I
yeah,
share with a lot of my clients that
absolutely.
I think is like a visual representation of what we're
Yeah,
talking about?
please.
So this is the Twin Peaks model from the NOI group. These are my colleagues in Australia from their book Explain Pain, which is a great book if people are interested in sort of
Is that
basic
Lorimer?
neuroscience. Lorimer Mosley, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you've seen this image before. The idea here is that before you had your injury or surgery, or before you had pain, because most pain is not due to injury or surgery, even from the beginning, even when it's acute,
Hmm.
before you had any symptoms, the your ability to move sort of looked like this on the left. There's a point where if you do too much, right, you have all this room underneath this line, this protect by pain line to move and to exercise and do whatever you want before your brain cares. Some point, your brain's going to start to say that feels like a lot, and it's going to turn on pain to try to protect you. This could be the 2 or 3 day delayed onset soreness that athletes get.
Hmm.
That's not injury necessarily, that's not damage, but it's real pain.
Sure.
Notice that that happens before we injure ourselves. So there's a gap, right? This is like an early danger alarm. After you've had surgery or injury or pain for a long time, now things look more like this. Okay, we've lost a little bit of fitness. The tissue tolerance has dropped a little bit.
Hmm.
The protect by pain line, the brain now as the governor, has dropped way down here. So the space you have under this line to do things without sensation is really small.
Yeah.
And
Because the
so
alarms go off. The
that's
brain
right.
is saying danger, danger. Stop doing that.
Yeah. So we want people to understand that the gap now between when they experience sensation and when they actually hurt themselves is massive to the point where they almost can't even get to the point where they're going to injure themselves because their brain's going to prevent them from doing that.
Right.
It's in such protection mode. Now there is a flare-up point, and we want to try to avoid that.
Hmm.
But I help people recognize that the flare-up point where the symptoms get worse for a month is really just the old protect by pain line gone a little gone a little strong,
Hmm.
stuck around a little too long. So we can trust that we can start to explore movement without worrying about our tissues, without worrying about our
Right.
deconditioning or whatever we're worried about with our body. In fact, if we stay in this safe zone below this line, it will not change. So we almost need to give people permission to bump up against this line with
Hmm.
confidence, which you're so good at, Dan, over and over and over again until it looks like this again. And in the process, we actually recondition our tissues. They get stronger and they get better, and the
Hmm.
flare up line goes away. So helping people understand that this gap between where they feel a sensation and where they're going to hurt themselves is really big, I think is important.
Yeah, one of the ways I explain it is that pain is a very unreliable indicator of the condition of the body. It is a very reliable indicator that the brain is perceiving danger.
Yes.
And so I love the fact that you've given that um, the gap between the onset of discomfort and actual tissue damage, because so many people struggle, and I really want to emphasize this for the audience. So many people struggle in thinking, if I feel pain, I'm doing damage. I'm harming my body. And that is absolutely not true. And your graphic really very well depicts that.
We'll give
So
Laura more credit for the graphic. I think it's brilliant.
I get it, but you
Yeah,
brought it up here.
yeah.
But you brought it up here. So I think that's extremely important that the onset of pain doesn't mean injury, doesn't mean you're damaging yourself. And it's evident. One of the guys in my group, he goes for, a 3 mile walk every day, but grimacing in pain. And I don't think he's harming his body. He's just suffering a lot. Right.
Mhm.
So I also have another gentleman who was training for the Berlin Marathon and ran into some significant knee pain. and to the point where he had to cancel on the marathon because he couldn't do his training. He's about a week and a half away from the New York Marathon, and his training is going well because he's been able to utilize the concepts I teach and implementing and, yeah, pushing against a little discomfort, but trusting he's not harming his body. And by doing so, he taught his brain that his knee's fine. And he's, a week and a half away from, in my view, successfully completing a New York City marathon. So,
It's a superpower for athletes. It really is. People doing long races and things to be able to reassure your way through when pain inevitably strikes.
sure.
And you're a guy, this is a week and a half before New York right
Yeah.
now.
Hmm.
So that taper phase for athletes where the hard training is done and they're actually decreasing their volume and intensity to let their body recover before race day,
Sure.
such a common time for athletes to have symptoms because we're not distracting ourselves with exercise.
Yeah.
We're thinking about anticipating the race. Our
Yeah.
family's going to come watch. All the fears come up: fear of
Sure.
success, fear of failure, imposter syndrome, whatever. And of course, athletes are going to have symptoms during that taper.
Yeah, so this gentleman, I'm really proud of him. He's done a great job of implementing, uh,
So cool.
testing, and I wouldn't say pushing his limits, but testing his limits and exceeding a little bit beyond the discomfort as a method of training himself that he's okay. And oftentimes, as he continues running with a little discomfort, it goes away. It doesn't stay, it doesn't increase, it goes away. So, but initially, before he really got into this, he got to the point where he'd have to stop, which is why he had to cancel that marathon. So, um, I'll just say, John, thank you for being an example here for this discussion. John's a good guy. He was on last night talking to me.
Yeah, one thing that athletes commonly worry about when they start to learn about mind body work is, does this mean that my brain is saying that running's not good for me or that I shouldn't be running marathons? Or like, is that the message? And so it's really powerful to show somebody like that's not the brain's not trying to communicate to you that you shouldn't be an athlete anymore at all.
No, the
Maybe
brain doesn't have a motive behind it other than protection.
yes.
Like the pain doesn't have a secret meaning. Other people assign an evil motive. My brain's working against me. It's trying to take away the things that I love. And I'm like, no, no, no. It's just perceiving that you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. And it's our job intellectually and then kind of accepting that I'm not really harming myself. And there's,
Yeah.
it's a perceived danger issue. And it's not the brain trying to convince you of anything other than don't do that because that hurts, or
Can
don't
I
do
ask,
that.
can I ask you a question, Dan,
Yeah,
about this? Just because
please.
I think this is an interesting, maybe it's a debate. People in the
Sure.
mind body world, coaches and clinicians. Um, Sometimes it makes sense to try to make meaning from symptoms because there's really something sacred that the brain is trying to tell you in its attempt to protect you. Other times it's actually helpful to depersonalize it, right? To actually not spend so much time making meaning, because it can add pressure and urgency to the process, and because it leads to storytelling and more anxiety. How do you navigate that with your people? Again, does it depend on the person for you?
A while ago, back when I was doing one-on-one coaching, 4 or 5 years ago, um, I used to walk people through these beliefs. Okay, I've got mind body pain, TMS, as Dr. Sarno called it, and it's from repressed emotion. So now I need to go find the repressed emotion. And there's a lot of the mind body space. It spends an awful lot of time with therapists, with journaling, with, introspection, expressive writing, all those things. And there's a lot of value in doing those things in general as a human being. But what I found was as long as somebody still has pain, they think I'm missing that repressed emotion. I got to keep digging.
Mhm.
When that may or may not be true. And that can kind of keep us stuck in a loop. The meaning question. For other people that say, well, there's probably a meaning behind my pain. Same scenario. As long as I have pain, I didn't find the meaning yet. I got to keep looking for the meaning. And between looking for the emotion, the repressed one that's somewhere buried deep in our subconscious from third grade, or looking for this, aha moment of meaning that my brain is trying to convince me of something, as long as you hurt, you're going to keep looking. And I think in often cases, you're looking, you're looking, you're looking, but you have failed to convince yourself that movement is safe and that my body is actually well enough, fit enough, sound enough to be symptom free. And so we can really get distracted by looking for this. Sometimes the meaning is apparent. Sometimes the emotion is apparent. Sometimes the perceived danger is obvious.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's not. And in my view, if it's not obvious, you don't have to spend the next 6 weeks looking for it. We can jump right to conveying safety. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of how I navigate that. And a lot of times in the coaching, people will be like, well, I hurt mostly at work. Does that mean I need a new job or I need to quit? I'm like, no. Or, you know, uh, my marriage isn't great. Do I have to leave my wife to get better? I'm like, no. And the answer to that question is if you were feeling great, would you quit your job or leave your wife? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then don't let pain or other symptoms be the reason to leave a job or a spouse.
Well said.
They don't have to be connected. And
Mhm.
that's the challenge that I run into in assigning a meaning behind the symptom.
Yeah.
Yes, there can be, and if you can figure it out, great. But what do we do with that meaning now?
Yeah, they're like they become connected and they can almost work in both ways. Your job could be driving your pain, but your pain could also be driving your challenges and your stress and anxiety with your job.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you saying again, we don't like to make rules. It depends.
Of
And I
course.
think what's helpful for people to know is there are so many doors, there's so many channels to do this. Like some people might need to really look to make meaning and look at the emotion. Other people really need to focus on their relationship with movement and exercise. So everybody has a different recipe, right? Which
Sure.
is why it's hard for us.
Yeah.
And for,
I just don't like to spend a lot of time assigning a meaning because how do you know if it's the right meaning? And okay, so I found a meaning. My spouse makes my head want to explode. That's why I've got headaches. Great. Now what? How is that curative? It might not be.
it might not be. And we could make an argument probably both ways, right? Like if there's some clear, overt relational stress that needs to be addressed, then
Mhm.
that probably makes sense, right? To,
Agreed. Agreed.
yeah.
And I like Dr. Schubner's approach. He talks about, a number of things, and life changes is at the very bottom of the list. Like if we've explored all this stuff and exhausted all those other things, sometimes, somebody married to a narcissist and truly in an unsafe mental, emotional, maybe even physical environment may need a lifestyle change. But I don't
Mhm.
start there. I
Right.
don't think that's really where we go because my experience is um, I was able to end 13 years of back pain while my marriage was coming apart. Not
Mhm.
afterwards. And it wasn't like I made a decision and then I got better. No, I got better during that emotionally chaotic time.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a good
So
example.
that's why I'm able to say we can separate life stress from
Mhm.
symptoms and we can still teach the brain, yeah, I'm living through a lot of chaos and stress and emotions, but dot, 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 I don't need to hurt because my
Mhm.
body is well enough, fit enough, sound enough that I don't need symptoms. And so I like to keep it as top level, the brain's perceiving danger, whatever that is. Let's focus on teaching the brain that we're okay, despite what's going on in life and
Yeah.
this wild and woolly planet and environment that we're living in, right?
Spicy meatball in our head that's has a mind of its own, right? It,
Exactly.
it also I think the other thing that comes up for me when I hear you talking about that is the idea that it's really difficult to access cognition, higher level thinking and problem solve and repair a relationship or make a decision about our job when we're living with pain. It's hard to expect somebody to make those life changes when they're living with a lot of symptoms, which is why it often comes last if it
Yeah,
needs to happen at all.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Um, So I know you talked earlier about uh, teaching that movement is safe. How do you do that in conjunction with, a mind-body approach? Like, the one thing that I questioned earlier, we talked about it offline, is do you fix the brain first, get rid of the pain, and then address the functional? Or like, how do we teach the brain movement is safe besides clarity of what's going on, what's causing the symptoms, and now go move?
Besides education, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, like the psychoeducation process of listening to podcasts and reading books and like learning about the model, you and I can agree like learning or understanding isn't the same as doing, right? So
Correct.
some people get well with this like more cognitive process. They get the book cure, let's say. Other
Very
people,
few, very few. Let's
very
be clear.
few. Totally. And I'm glad you said that because I just met with a client who's been struggling for 18 months with back pain, and he's really frustrated that he's not better yet. And success stories are really hard for him to listen to. Um, so
How
yeah, the
many
book.
times have you heard this? Charlie, I know all about mind body pain. How come I'm not better?
Yeah.
And I'm like, knowledge by itself isn't the cure. How are you implementing the concepts of teaching your brain that your
Totally.
body's okay and that you're actually safe and that movement is all right? How are you teaching yourself actively that you're okay?
Yeah.
Because so many people are like, I read the books. Why aren't I better? I understand it. And I'm like, yeah, it's an active process to kind of teach your brain that you're okay. It's not just like, let me absorb the contents of this book and I'm better. Poof. And I think it's a fraction of a fraction of a percent that gets the book cure. It's
Agree.
not. So for anybody who hears about a book cure and is frustrated they didn't get it, neither did the other 99.8% of the people dealing with mind body conditions. So don't feel bad that you're not a book cure.
No,
Almost never happens.
knowing is not doing, I say. We need to get out of the stands and onto the playing field. Like, how many skills have you learned in your life by watching a YouTube video, but without doing it?
Correct.
Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't
It's like
happen.
everybody who's out there trying to start a business. It's like, oh, I went to business school and I read all this and I've watched all these videos and okay, what business are you running? Oh, I haven't figured that out yet. I remember back in the days when I would go to these marketing conferences and I would see somebody and they're all gung ho and they're there learning marketing. And like, 3 years later, I'd see the same person at a marketing workshop and, I'm building a business and I built a business and making sales. And I'm like, oh, so what are you up to? And well, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm like, stop going to conferences, start a business, right? So the same thing holds true for people. They can get so focused on the knowledge acquisition. I got to listen to one more podcast. I got to read one more book. I've had literally had people say, Dan, I've read these three books. What book should I read next?
And,
Do
and
you-
for, and for so many reasons, right? Like there's so many reasons why it's hard to get out of the stands onto the playing field.
Mhm.
Even perfectionism being probably one
'Cause
of
it
the
hurts.
because it hurts, and because I'm worried I'm going to do it wrong, or I don't know
That
how
is
to
so
do
key.
it, right? And so I always like to normalize and that for people that it's a leap of faith. It's really challenging to start even just doing the work.
Yeah.
Um, it even is about like acknowledging that this is my brain and nervous system is scary, right? To even
Yeah. What's
accept
wrong with me? Am I crazy if my brain is doing this to me? And
because
I've
there's
got
no
to dispel those myths all the time.
totally. And so going back to what your question, like, first of all, I want to say there's nothing to fix. Your body's not broken and your brain's not broken, right? We're
Correct.
not fixing anything. Your brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's working perfectly. In fact, it's working too well, right? It's gotten too good at it. So when we talk about learning, right, how can we start to work the process, do the work? Some of that is intellectual cognitive, some of that is somatic. When I say somatic, I mean through the body and PRT, somatic tracking. There's so many somatic strategies. It's a big category. But generally, we're saying we're working with the sensations in our body instead of thinking about them. And so think about it like manual therapy, body work, and exercise are by definition somatic based interventions if
Mhm.
we can do it without fear. And so I tend to start by helping people understand that that's what we're doing. We're trying to have a conversation with the brain from the bottom up to help interrupt prediction, to give them a new experience, right? I couldn't squat, and then I changed this way I was thinking, and I feel safer now, and now I can squat. Amazing,
That
you
word
know?
prediction is so important,
Yeah.
and
So
I think that's expectation is prediction. And so if you
yes,
expect to hurt, Dr. Schubner's taught this for years. If you expect to hurt, your brain's going to turn it on, whether there's a mechanical or any type of reason. So we've got to manage our predictions and expectations and start to shift them and
that's
start
right.
expecting I can do better with this. I can go for a walk without, screaming in pain. We got to change the prediction because predictive coding says I'm going to give you what you think you're going to get.
Yeah. And it happens before you even go do the movement. The prediction is already in
Oh,
place
yeah.
behind the scenes. So I use my time with people in the clinic to give them a new experience with things, to
Hmm.
show them how quickly things can change. Some people think my room is somehow magical. I'm like, nothing magical about this room, right? But I can be your confidence. I can reassure you. I can support you in feeling safe to do these things.
Yeah.
And when that context is different, you can do things that you never imagined. Then I want you to carry that back out into your life and prove it to yourself, you know? So there are lots of ways to do that from, um, I can use language to sort of almost hypnotize people, safety language as they're doing things. We can use visualization to interrupt the prediction before they even start the movement. It's a really safe way to start movement is to just start visualizing it and having a successful experience in your
Yeah.
mind. Sometimes I've had people visualize standing up from a chair and then they stand up from the chair and it doesn't hurt. Like right afterwards. It's cool. We
Change
can
the
use
prediction.
That's
Exactly.
right. You can see it in the moment, real time. It's very cool. Um, we can bring humor into the situation and create a change. We can make things playful. We can change the rules. I can have someone walking backwards instead of walking forwards, right? And they have a new experience. So this is one of my favorite parts about the movement part, like the gradual exposure part, is getting really creative with people and how to deliver a new experience for them. Does that make sense as a starting
Yeah,
point?
absolutely. No, that's great. Um, Question for you. I've got some people that one lady in particular is dealing with drop foot,
Mhm.
which she's working on. Another person has a struggle with just forward movement with the right leg. And somehow neurologically, the brain has concluded that that's difficult or not possible. Um, and I'm just kind of curious to pick your brain as to what you think might be going on there. I believe these are mind-body conditions. Steve Ozanich had drop foot. He was able to resolve it with the mind-body approach. So, like, what's your take on some of this functional neurological stuff? Um, I mean, what's your take on something like that? So, this one particular lady, she can walk with sticks or a walker, but as she goes to move her right leg forward, it doesn't want to go. And so, what do you think might be going on? And I know it's tough to put you on the spot and ask that, but have you seen that type of functional problem that was created by a brain just believing they can't do that?
Think like categorically, the first thing to say is that, and this is really helpful for people to understand, that the brain can create very real physical changes in the body secondarily as a byproduct of this danger alarm phenomenon. So muscles will lose power, the timing of muscles around your hip joint won't be great. And so it might make some noise, or it might feel unstable, or feel like it's giving out.
Hmm.
You won't actually be able to do a movement, or you'll lose range of motion in a joint, like a frozen shoulder is a good example, right? People
Yeah,
say, but this is a real physical change in my body.
right.
I know, but that's because your brain has decided you're not safe.
So it locks it up.
Going back to the meaning idea, right? I love asking the question, why did your brain choose this symptom? It has thousands of symptoms it could have chosen.
Yeah.
Why did it choose this symptom of you not being able to take another step? or you not being able to move forward in your life, right? So sometimes there's meaning to be made there.
Yeah.
Suffice it to say that the brain is in charge of all of this. And so even though there's a real physical limitation, as long as we've ruled out some nerve damage that's causing that drop foot, which it
Hmm.
sounds like this person has probably already done that.
Yeah. They've been down that path.
They've been down that path and there's no clear smoking gun. Um, then it's no different from any other symptom in that way,
Yeah. I
right?
had a gentleman who's like a rock and roll guitarist, and he got what he was diagnosed with focal dystonia, and he lost the ability to move his arms and play the guitar. And it was great because I never worked with him. He just watched my videos, and I'm not sure the extent of it, the other help he got, but he was able to, with a mind-body approach, regain functionality, overcome this diagnosis of focal dystonia, and the dude's out on stage rocking in front of audiences of thousands of people again. So,
Amazing. Amazing.
so for somebody with a drop foot, for somebody who's just their brain is kind of like not flowing and getting that foot moving forward, I believe that there's absolutely hope and possibility and probability of recovery. But would you treat those folks any differently? Like, how would you convey safety to them? Because at the same time, I just want to point out my mom had a stroke and she needed to learn how to use her left arm and her left leg again.
Mhm.
Functional problem in the brain, pea-sized portion. You could see it on the scans.
Mhm.
And nobody talked about brain wiring with her. All they did was say, let's move your arm, let's move your leg, lift it up off of the, and let's take a cup and put it inside another cup. And it was all just through doing
Or making it task oriented, which is a strategy.
that
Yeah,
her brain just learned how to do those things again. And I think a lot of the mind body space overcomplicates it with the brain rewiring program. And like,
I agree.
come on, when in our lives have we ever had to focus on brain wiring?
Right. The reality is the brain is neuroplastic without us having to try. It's when we
Correct.
get in its way that it stalls,
Correct.
right?
So yeah, like so somebody with these struggles, like being that you're both a biomechanical person as well as a mind body, somebody who's got drop foot or is unable to move a right foot forward, what might be your approach with them?
Yeah, it always depends on the person. This
I
is an
love
example
depends,
where
always that
I
disclaimer.
might, I might start with trying to understand why that symptom and trying to derive some meaning from why the brain chose to take away their ability to do that thing.
Okay.
Like I might just ask some questions along those lines. But unless there's some clear structural thing, right, I'm going to treat it just like any other symptom. My experience with dystonia, whether it's runner's dystonia or which I've seen a lot, or other types of dystonia, not too different from other harder to treat conditions like CRPS
Mhm.
or chronic fatigue, is that there tends to be um, sometimes more underlying emotional stuff that we need to get to that created that more complex symptom. I'm not saying it's always the case, but it's sort of like it piques my that part of my brain to think, what else do we need to look at here? Um,
Like what else is going on besides the lack of
what
mobility?
else is going on in this person's life where their brain had to do this like pretty extreme thing to get them to go into what might be considered more of a freeze state, what
Hmm.
might be considered more of a in a polyvagal theory, what might be considered more of a like shutdown kind of state. You've gone so far into sympathetic fight or flight danger alarm. You've been there so long that you've
Hmm.
burned that out and you've collapsed.
Yeah.
So I think of those symptoms more as freeze symptoms, and that's why they're different sometimes.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, it definitely does help. I'm thinking of another client of mine that's been dealing with a whole bunch of sensitivities, mold, Lyme, EMF, like this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and she is experiencing numbness that really she says the sensation is like numbness from the brain down and almost, and it sounds like that would be in the line of like the polyvagal freeze shutdown. that things are too intense, the sensations, the symptoms in reaction to this hypervigilant system is so intense that the brain is just going numb, shutting it off.
Yes,
That
exactly.
doesn't mean the nervous system is damaged or closing down for good. It just means that everything is way too intense, and the numbness is the extreme result of a brain just going too intense, let's shut it down. So I don't view this as a life-threatening condition. It is like this person's still waking up every day, but such an extreme case of shutdown that literally is feeling numb, you know, from the
Yeah,
brain
well
down.
said. Well said. And it's important to mention like the state of freeze or dissociation or shutdown is a totally normal, functional nervous system state. Like before you get up on stage to do an important talk, some people will disassociate. That's a
Mhm.
functional reaction. It's just not supposed to last that long.
Right.
So it's when people get stuck in that state for a long time that it's really a problem.
The challenge is that sometimes the doctors don't know what to do with it. So for this person who's feeling the numbness, the doctor didn't have an answer, but he says, you really need to deal with this because if you don't, it's going to kill you. Like, gee, thanks, doc. And now
That's what the
this,
doctor says.
yeah,
Yeah.
this poor woman is terrified that she's like on the path to imminent death. And so how do you get out of that fight or flight, you know? And so thank you for your opinion on that. Like the shutdown, the freeze. In my view, that echoes mine. I think the brain's just saying too
Mhm.
intense, we're going to numb it out.
Yeah. I was trying to find a slide to share with you to sort of show how this polyvagal phenomenon plays out.
Hmm.
What's important to know about this freeze state is that it's the nervous system's last resort to protect the person.
Hmm.
And to get back out of that to a ventral vagal state, which is calm, grounded, regulated, the challenge is the reason it's so hard is because you have to go back through the sympathetic state, which is very uncomfortable for people.
Yeah,
It requires movement of some sort to get the body turned back on. And it often requires the expression of hard emotions like anger, which also gets the body turned back on. It's part of getting them back into a fight state.
right.
Then they can drop back down into calm, but they can't shortcut. There's no shortcut, unfortunately, which is why it's hard for people.
So
But
in
there,
that case where somebody is hypersensitive to something like mold or EMFs, it seems like the only way out of that is through exposure and allowing the reaction, but responding to the reaction differently, as opposed to responding to the reaction as if horrible things are happening.
100%.
So do
Yeah.
you agree, though, that exposure is the way to dial down the sensitivities? I think sensitivities are a volume issue. So people
Yes.
who are chemically sensitive, their brain just says chemicals are dangerous. I smell them, symptoms flare.
Even the
And
thought
it's a
of chemicals are
volume
dangerous.
issue. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, um, thank you. I appreciate that. Here I am. It's like, hey, let me talk to Charlie. And now all of a sudden I'm throwing my difficult cases at him. But I
No, it's good.
appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, this is how we need to support each other and our clients because I mentor clinicians every week. I have a clinician consult group of like 12 clinicians from around the world,
Awesome.
and mostly we talk about tough cases because all of us have tough cases that are not playing by the rules,
Right.
and it's such a great way for us to learn.
It's
Um,
comforting to have somebody else like yourself kind of echo that I'm on the right track. Right.
yeah,
Because with some of it, it's like, oh, I haven't dealt with that before. I've never had somebody say going numb. My intuition says shut down, numb out, too intense. But it's really nice to hear from somebody else who's had exposure to a number of these things. So
yeah,
I
I
thank
couldn't
you
I
for that.
couldn't find my unfortunately I couldn't find my image, but I do have this other image that I could
Yeah,
share that
please.
also would like add to this conversation a little bit.
Hmm.
Uh, this is the homunculus. For people who don't know what the homunculus is, this is how your brain sees your body. Your brain has a representation of your body. There's a strip in the cortex that's dedicated to incoming information sensation. There's a strip on the cortex that's dedicated to outgoing information. That's motor output, right? Your ability to move your body.
Sure.
Parts of the body that have a lot of sensation dedicated to them, like the hands and the tongue and the eyes, are very big, take up a lot of brain space. The other parts are relatively smaller.
Sure.
Ideally, the homunculus, it has a lot of clarity, right? One example I use is when people start wearing really foamy Hoka shoes all the time because they worry their plantar fasciitis is going to be a problem. They're insulating their foot from the world, and that part of the homunculus gets blurry or smudged or out of focus. It doesn't have the information it needs. So paradoxically, getting people back barefoot slowly, gradually, can be really helpful
Yeah.
because the brain, think about when you take your glasses off, right? If you take your glasses off and you go into a complex situation and the world is blurry, it's gonna be scary.
Hmm.
Your brain's no different. If things are blurry and smudged, it's going to protect that body part in some way until it gets more information about what's happening in the world. Because the brain is in this dark vault, just like, I don't know what's going on out there. I need the tissues, I need the feet and the hands to tell me. So when you talk about these freeze conditions where the muscles aren't performing the way you want them to, it's often helpful to think about what can we do from the bottom up to give the brain information about that body part. And sometimes touch is really helpful, and sometimes movement and exercise is really helpful as part of that process of restoring the brain's clarity about that ankle or that hip or whatever it is. Did I explain that well
Yeah.
enough?
No, that's great. And so for the lady who has a struggle in moving her right leg forward while she's trying to walk,
Mhm.
would it be beneficial for somebody like that to have some secondary manual help and let's move the foot forward? How does that feel so they can get used to that feeling? Or should it be solely them initiating that? And I guess experiment, it depends.
Depends, but like similar to your mom, it sounds like the clinicians did a good job of making it task oriented.
Hmm.
So instead of like trying to overthink it or micromanage it, and this is what PTs get wrong, is they're trying to micromanage movement and make it about biomechanics and do this and control that and your foot and your knee. It's like, no,
Yeah.
just like let's make it task oriented. If I want to get someone starting to run again, just to get used to jogging, why don't you go throw the frisbee with your kid?
Yeah.
You're going to squat, you're going to jump, you're going to run, you're going to twist, you're going to, right? That's a task oriented
Hmm.
thing to do. So sometimes you need to start at the beginning and really start small and have a therapist sort of cueing you and using electrical stimulation, needling. But what that should move towards is more task oriented functional things to light up the part of the brain that remembers how to use that body part.
Yeah, what really surprised me was still sitting in the hospital, hadn't even been discharged from the hospital to, rehab yet. My mom was maybe 2, 3 days out of the stroke, and she took an arm that was literally dead. She had to move it around with her other arm, like just wouldn't move at all. 3 days later, she did this.
Wow.
To me, that shows how neuroplastic the brain is. Because what the brain said is, well, this portion that controlled that, not there. Let's fire up some other, you know, wires, cabling. And
That
before you knew it, I
probably
was like, Mom, do that again. Got my camera. I'm like, holy crap, 3 days. Right. And so I just use that as evidence at how fast the brain can recalibrate and figure things out.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that with your mom. It's terrifying.
I mean, it's a blessing because she's doing extremely well 3 years later. And um, so, yeah, but for sure, scary. And believe it or
Yeah.
not, sitting bedside with her, watching her struggle, my back pain came back.
Ooh, yeah.
No
Interesting.
surprise. But what was cool was I said, I know what that is. Not concerned. I gave it the amount of attention it warranted, which was little to none, focused on mom. And within 10 days, it was gone. Never became chronic. So
Beautiful.
just
Beautiful.
evidence that danger of any type, emotional, life, stress, can signal the brain that something bad's going on, and the brain can just go, ouch.
It's
Very
brilliant.
cool.
I think there's a subset of people, maybe you and I are among those, that can almost use ambivalence as a strategy in those moments to recognize, yeah, there's a lot of big emotional stuff happening right now. This is a really, difficult thing, but the pain is not important. I'm just not going to worry about it. And I think
Indifference.
that as a PT, I just maybe that's why I've never had a long chronic pain journey because I do that naturally.
Mhm.
But I wish I could like distill that for people and like drop it under their tongue so that they could just be able to adopt that mindset of like it's not important. It's not important.
Yeah, I build the understanding from the ground up. How does the human body and brain function? Does that apply to me? And if you understand how it functions, and yes, it applies to me, then I don't have to sweat the body stuff, like, because my body's okay. And so, built on that foundation of knowledge, it's easier to be less bothered by the pain because you're saying, but I understand it. It's a signal. I call it a false alarm. Some people might disagree, but um, there's no fire in the kitchen. The smoke detector's going off, but there's no fire. So I like the term unbothered. I used to say indifference, and people would look at me like, Dan, you're crazy. How can I be indifferent to this? It hurts so bad. I'm like, well, it's temporary. It's not evidence of damage. And we know the brain's doing it as a protective mechanism because it thinks something dangerous is going on. So you can freak out about the symptoms all you want, but that's not going to help convey safety. It's just going to keep the danger alarm going. So now that we understand this intellectually, it's challenging, but we can integrate it and go, I'm actually okay. I call that the holy crap moment. Like, holy crap, I'm really okay. And then it becomes easier, not easy, but easier to be less concerned by symptoms or pain. And it goes for lots of things, not just pain.
Sure. I'm always, empathic to people who grew up right in a state of hypervigilance and they learned that behavior because it was really important to keep them safe when they were younger. And, I recognize that that's why it's hard for people at this
Mhm.
point with their pain is because that's just a default, natural, easy reaction for them. Something that I don't feel like I ever had, which is why I wish I could distill it and
Sure.
just drop it on their tongue. But people ask, like, how do I know if I do that, Charlie? How do I know if I'm injured? And I tell them, like, I have pain all the time. Like, our bodies are noisy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm an athlete. I have pain in my body all the time. But 99 times out of 100, it doesn't stick around
Yeah.
because I don't get a lot of attention. So I've proved it to myself over time, over and over and over and over again. But if I want to try to answer that question, it's was there an injury? If there wasn't an injury, was there something that happened that might have been an injury? Like usually there's not.
Yeah.
We're good at making up stories though, aren't we? About like, oh, maybe it was this, maybe it was that.
Oh, well, people said I bent over weird.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, the body's not that frail or easily broken.
No,
You
body's
didn't
not.
injure your body by bending over sideways to reach for something. And I love Sarno's old statement, when people go into his office and go, what happened? He goes, oh, I picked up something too heavy. And he goes, no, you didn't, because if it was too heavy, you wouldn't have been able to pick it up. Right. And that was just Sarno logic.
Direct. Yeah. It's really
So I
good.
love
So,
that.
so how do you know? Like, how do you know, right? Like if the symptoms are a problem, they're going to be consistent. They're going to stick around. They're not just going to take care of themselves like most of mine do. And so you kind of just get to the point where you know based on experience and based on feel that you can write that one off, right? You don't want to scare yourself 99 times to catch the one time that it's
Yeah.
potentially an issue. And if you understand, as you said, that the body isn't fragile, you can have more license to do that.
Yeah. So some people will say to me, well, I don't know if it was an injury or not. And I'm like, this one phrase, trust the body, teach the brain, right? Okay, let's say you did tweak yourself at the gym because it's possible to overextend a muscle, strain it a little bit. Okay, trust the body, let's teach the brain. Like, I don't need to think my way through that. Let me rest the muscle and see what happens. And I had a case where I was trying to do some sprints up the driveway. And sure enough, it was a cold day. I hadn't warmed up. I go sprinting up the driveway, and all of a sudden it's like, ouch, back of my hamstring. I was like, what was that? And I immediately had clarity. And I said, well, maybe I pulled it. Maybe I didn't. There's no way for me to know. I could have ran out for an emergency MRI, but they might not have been able to see anything. And so I said, well, that'll either resolve itself if it was an injury, or if I treat it like TMS, it will resolve itself. So my response didn't have to differ. I didn't have to figure out injury or not because it's impossible to figure out sometimes. And I just simply said, well, if it was a pull, it'll be okay. And if it was TMS, it'll be okay. And sure enough, within 3 days, I stopped limping and my leg felt normal.
Amazing.
It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be complicated. But
Great,
people
great
will
story.
tell me stories, oh, I've had back pain for 10 years. I'm like, well, what happened? Oh, I injured it 10 years ago. I'm like, injuries heal. How come that hasn't? Right? And so
This is another slide I share with people when
love it.
they want to understand healing times, right? For how quickly things are likely to heal. So
Mhm.
it can be very reassuring to see that it's been 2 years. I've had this patellar tendon pain or this Achilles tendon pain or this plantar fascia pain, right? That
Mhm.
that it's not your body anymore. Your
Correct.
tissues heal viably. You almost can't stop it.
Right. You can't stop healing from happening in most cases. I mean, I guess if you have a sprained ankle and you continue to run every day, that may delay healing, but
And
you
even
know,
even then, arguably, movement is the best thing for healing. I have a um, client who has been dealing with a couple years of back pain and he's recovered and now he's back rock climbing again. This
cool.
past weekend, pulled off a piece of rock climbing, and it hit him in the hand and broke his thumb. So he broke his metacarpal.
Sure.
He's like, it was still swollen, like he showed me. He's like, it hurt for about 2 days and now it doesn't hurt at all anymore. Right? That's so weird that a broken bone that still has 8 more weeks of healing time doesn't hurt at all, but his back, which is not injured at all, has been hurting for 2 years. So the idea that pain is meant to turn off even before healing is over, we don't even need to wait for that 8, 10, 12 week healing time. Pain is meant to turn off long before healing is done. And the best thing you can do to facilitate healing of something like a sprained ankle is to start being active as soon as you're able to.
Yeah.
It actually makes healing better.
So evidence about the perception of danger driving pain. My ex-wife is a runner. She's done, trails, ultras, all that stuff. She was running through the woods, rolled her ankle on a tree root, legitimate. She heard the click, broke the tibia down right above the ankle. And so she had to hobble out of the woods. And every time she'd hobble out, ouch, 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 significant pain. Got to the, emergency room. Yep, you broke it. It's nice and clean. You'll be running in 10 weeks. Got the boot, got the crutches. And apparently 2 days later, 90% of the pain was gone. Why? It was still not healed. She could have gone into another emergency room and they would have said, oh, no wonder. But what decreased the perception of danger? The fear. Oh, she's got a boot on. She's using crutches. Nothing dangerous is happening. We don't need the alarms to be 10 out of 10. So it came down like 90%. That's evidence that the perception of danger determines the presence and the intensity of the pain. And
Even
so,
real injury, as you said,
true.
it doesn't really
And,
matter.
and the rock climbing guy, he was like, it sucks, but I'll be okay. Perception of danger way down, still had to heal. That's the brilliance of the body. And that's why if your symptoms are really intense, it's most likely that the brain's driving the bus.
I mean, the brain is always driving the bus. That's the thing I almost have to remind myself
Yeah.
that even with this thumb fracture, the only reason it hurts is because his brain is receiving information that it's not sure is safe. You
Well,
know?
yeah, and I always say that the brain is always the interpreter,
Mhm.
right? So in that case, ouch. But if the brain didn't have the insight and the knowledge that something bad happened, it
Yeah.
likely wouldn't have turned on pain. And I use the example of touching a hot stove. You touch a hot stove, the signals go up to the brain, and it's the brain that has to go, wait a minute, Charlie's in front of the stove. The stove's been on. It felt a little bit warm, and he's touching metal. And the brain instantly, in microseconds, ouch. So we yank our hand away. And then a second later, there's no pain, and we're not even burnt. So why did it hurt? Because the brain said, hey, Charlie, get your hand off the stove. And it
Well,
protected us.
what's so interesting about that initial response from a science perspective is that that first response to remove the hand is a reflex.
Mhm.
It's not, it hasn't even reached the level of consciousness yet.
No, not conscious, completely subconscious.
But the pain afterwards, right? The delayed pain, if there is any, is more of this brain decision, right? The reflex is the first, and then
Right.
it's followed by how you're going to interpret that moment,
Well,
right?
and that interpretation happens when you look at your finger and go, am I
Mhm.
burnt? And if it's bright red, the pain's likely to continue,
I,
right? But yeah,
I,
it's incredible. The
it's
brain determines whether or not symptoms are there or how intense.
how subjective it is, right? How it can be different between people and how it can be different within one person's experience depending on the day or the moment is kind of fascinating. So I like to say the debate that people have about is it my brain or is it my body? Like it's always your brain. Your brain is always in charge of your pain. Sometimes information from the body is informing your brain's decision.
Yes.
Sometimes. How much of that we can sometimes get a sense, but it's only a small part of it.
Yeah. So I want to honor your time. I know you said you're close to being to needing to move on today. So is there anything else you'd want to share in the last couple of minutes before we wrap this up? Something that you just think is really important for people to know about that we haven't touched on yet?
Oh, Dan, there are so many things.
What's pick one? Because if this goes
Well,
over well, and I'm sure it will, maybe we can do this every once in a while.
I think I screenshotted this thing from my client yesterday. She shared that she listened to Sanjay Gupta's conversation with Mel Robbins.
Hmm.
He's wrote a book about chronic
I
pain, which
didn't
I
get a
think
chance to listen to the whole thing yet, but it seemed right along the lines of what we're talking about.
she listened to it and she said every time I listen to something, going back to what we were talking about before, I noticed that my pain goes away. It comes back and then I listen to something and it goes away. Like lucky her, right?
Hmm.
I asked her what her takeaways is, and I said, isn't that cool evidence? And she said in her response that for her, repetition and reminders are really critical as part of her process. And I think that's why I appreciate your content so much, is because it's calm, it's elegant, you're very well spoken, and it gives people this like consistent ping, this consistent reminder that they're okay, because otherwise the brain defaults back. Pain is so compelling, isn't it? Even when we understand it, it's so well designed to scare us and get our attention.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Fear sounds really logical. And if fear is behind most pain, like in essence, danger, um, yeah, pain is extremely logical. Something bad's going on. And you're right. The repetition of what I talk about on a daily basis, I've had countless comments of people going, yeah, you know what? You've told me the same thing over and over and over again, but it took till like watching you for 6 months before it clicked.
yeah.
And one time learning happens for negative things. You can touch a hot stove once and you learn instantly. You want to teach your brain that you're safe? You need a lot of repetition because the brain's default is survival and safety. And
Yes.
if it learned that something is dangerous, like me bending over, it took a lot of repetition for me to learn that bending over is safe because every acute onset or spasm that I had was from bending over. My brain was rock solid that bending over was no bueno. Don't do it. So, the daily videos are the repetition people sometimes need. And I always joke, I'm like, I got close to 2,600 total videos. of me talking about 25 different things over and over and over again. What is
I feel like a broken record on my Instagram channel sometimes. I'm like, here we go again, talking about the same thing, but it's important. And as you said, it's it doesn't have to be complicated. I think you and I really align on this idea that like the process
simple?
doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to involve 17 different modalities.
No.
In fact, one thing I learned from Howard Schubiner when I asked him about Howard, how do you deal with these really complex cases that come to you? And in Howard's infinite wisdom, he said, Charlie, what I do is not make it more complicated. I don't go into these other things and add things. I go back to the beginning, I start over, and I recognize that somewhere along the way, something got missed. You need to fill that gap, get someone on track, get them simple strategies, and that's how I navigate it. And I was like, that is so brilliant.
Yeah. I always, whenever I'm talking to somebody new in the coaching, let's go back. How are you on the foundation? Do you understand what creates symptoms? Have you assessed through the mind body assessment that all these practitioners use? Very similar questions. Do you understand what causes it and have you assessed it? And where are you on accepting that? Until we get the foundation, I don't care how well you meditate or journal or somatic track or pain reprocess therapy. If you don't understand the foundation of what's going on, good luck. You're not going to convince your brain that you're okay if you don't understand that your brain's creating the pain.
Strategies do not work. I don't care how many of them you're doing or how well you're doing them, they will not work if you haven't established that foundation.
Correct. And I always say simple, not easy, because the simplicity is, that's the golden nugget.
Yeah.
But boy, is it difficult to overcome perhaps a lifetime of hypervigilance. And that's one last point I'll make is I am extremely clear. A lot of people who are dealing with these mind-body conditions are very down on themselves, like I must be weak or crazy or this is my fault. It's not your fault. It's just where you ended up. The good news is with this new knowledge and insight and some practice, you can get out of it. So it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to take this newfound knowledge, implement. It's not the knowledge, it's the implementation, right? Like you said, you
Mhm.
gotta stop learning, get out of the book and onto the pavement in order to really move forward.
And you and I have this perspective. I always remind myself of seeing the gifts that come on the other side of recovering from symptoms, right? Like you want to be able to promise that to people because it really is rewarding. There is gold at the end of the rainbow, as I say,
There is
but it's
life after
just
chronic
that
pain. There
hard to
is life
trust
after chronic pain.
that. Yeah, I knew we were going to get along well, Dan. I knew we had a lot to talk about and a lot in
Oh, this is
common.
great. And I love the intermixing of the body and the brain. And you
Mhm.
bring a perspective that I didn't have. But it's nice to see the commonalities in the way we view these things and approach them. And I think it's just fascinating how you're taking people coming in for a body problem and you're going, well, let's teach you a few things. I think
Uh-huh.
that's fantastic because we need more practitioners like you in the body space to introduce these concepts because most practitioners are not open to it.
No.
And the medical doctors, they're not trained it. And even the physical therapists are just going, well, mechanical, you got
Not
back pain,
yet.
let's strengthen the core.
Not yet. We're getting there. Yeah,
No,
we're
I love
busting
it.
myths. We're blowing it up. So if I could just quickly plug my course that I teach for physical therapists, other body-oriented clinicians, it's happening actually right now. We're in week 3 through the Pain Reprocessing Therapy Center. It'll
Okay.
happen. There'll be another cohort probably in the spring, and it's really rewarding because my colleagues um, are going to be really, really helpful on this big team that we're on of trying to get people out of the the hamster wheel of chronic pain. I also teach a course for athletes that I'll probably start in January. That's sort of my passion area.
Okay.
So please reach out if you're an athlete that
Yeah. So
wants
where
to.
can people find you? What's the website that people can go look you up?
So my website is the letter M, performance.com. Probably the better place to find me is on Instagram, which is just my name at Charlie Merrill. I
Two
have a
R's,
whole
two L's.
Two R's, two L's. Thank you. I have a link tree there that has all my links to all my things. And I'm not hard to find. My phone number and my email is on my website, which is
All
why I
that.
get 20 spam calls a day probably. But yeah, reach out anytime if you have questions.
Awesome. Listen, Charlie, appreciate it. It was really great to see you in person again in Boulder, and I'll see you in Dallas next year.
Oh, wait,
And
great.
if I can ever do anything for you, you let me know. And if
Thanks.
you ever feel like doing this again, I'm sure there's lots of topics we didn't cover, but I think there were some really good insights. And so I appreciate your time and
You
your
too,
friendship.
Dan.
And
Yeah, thanks for making the space and we'll talk soon.
absolutely, take care.
All right, take care.